Hi, welcome to my blog. My name is Tom Chu, and today we're going to do an image development tutorial. And I'm going to basically use Photoshop for everything, but since all my images live inside Lightroom, we'll start there. Right here you can see an image that I've used before on the tutorial. It was a clouds tutorial, and we're going to use it again because this image was exposed to the right. Exposing to the right is a technique to where you can get the most dense file that you can create, or a file with the most amount of information on it that you can create when you capture raw. The reason why is when you have an image that is all shadow detail, so if we grab this down here, it's all like underexposed. It doesn't take a lot of information to make these shades of gray. Consider it's like all of these shades of gray to black, and that's all the information in the file. So the file is going to be pretty small. Whereas if you have a file that's all the way exposed from highlights to shadows without clipping the highlights, and how you can tell it when you clip your highlights is you can turn on your blinking warnings in your camera, and you can look at the histogram and see that if everything's pushed to the right like this, that you'll know that there's nothing there in those highlights. It's all been clipped. The information is gone, that you've exposed too far to the right. The whole trick on exposing to the right is to get a file that's as bright as possible, that contains all that highlight information without clipping the highlight. So if we turn on the highlight warning, you'll see that exposing to the right would mean creating a file that was something like this. See, without clipping those clouds at all, this is the brightest you can get. And if you notice your file sizes, when you import them and you right click and click on properties, something that you expose to the right versus one that you exposed correctly dead in the center, or you underexposed, you'll notice that your files get smaller as they're underexposed. They get a little bit bigger when they're exposed in the middle, but they get even bigger when they're exposed to the right. You see, it's real easy to create a shadow or create blacks. You can just crush the blacks at any moment. You can create blacks, but you can't take something that's already black and make it white. And if it's white 100%, information's gone. It just doesn't exist. So exposing to the right is a technique that you can use to get a dense file, so that in post, when you develop it in post, like taking a negative in a darkroom, or taking your raw file into a digital space like Photoshop or Lightroom, you can get as much out of the file as possible because it's got so much information to work with. Well, this really isn't an exposed to the right tutorial. However, I just wanted to teach you about that while we're here. So we're going to go ahead and reset this. And we all know that if you hold down the Alt key, you can come down here in Lightroom and you could set a black point, and an Alt key is an Option key on a Mac. And if you hold that down and then you bring it to the left, you'll see that it starts to clip. It's a highlight warning, and it's saying this is the shadow clipping area. Anything that's black or yellow, that's clipped. That means it's completely black. And you can do the same thing on a white and set a white point. If you move it to the right, you see that's all clipped, so you stop there. And now you set a white point, you set a black point. And then you can go in and adjust, your highlights and your shadow information and stuff like this. We got highlight warnings turned on, so we turn this off. And say you want to adjust your clarity, you add all these different controls, maybe some contrast, however you want to do it, your vibrance and colors. Well, you've got all this adjustment, but if you look at the back of the mountains, they're kind of got a blue haze to them, and it's hard to control that. And maybe the greens are not the kind of green that you're looking for with the vibrance control. You can go into HSL and click on it and drag things like, say for example, say we're in HSL and we want to go into the saturation. We click on here, we want the greens to be less saturated or more saturated. Yeah, we can do that, and we can make the sky less blue or more blue. But it's hard to get a localized adjustment on this, say this mountain, to get rid of the blue without using a adjustment brush tool and doing some fancy work inside Lightroom. So let's move over into Photoshop. We'll reset this, and if you right click and say, let's get out of this adjustment tool, and you right click and say edit in Photoshop, or you can hit Command or Control E, and it will export the image automatically into Photoshop. Okay, so now we're here. Let's just make a duplicate copy of our file, which is Control or Command J. so that we always have a safety net in case we do something to mess our file up. This is part of the non-destructive workflow. Well, inside Photoshop, you can do so much with adjustment layers. However, some of those adjustment layers can be combined. For example, you can use levels, and you can use brightness and contrast, and hue saturation. However, there's a lot better workflow, and that is the curves tool. A lot of people are intimidated by the curves tool, but it's a lot like what happens in Lightroom. Here's your black point, and here's your white point. This histogram right here represents the file, right over here. You can see that it's a compressed version. If it was stretched out this far, it'd be the same as this histogram. Whenever you see this little exclamation point in a histogram, or right here, it's saying that it hasn't been updated and it's not accurate. If you just double click it, now that goes away and it does represent exactly what the histogram is. Okay, so if we want to set a black point on our image, what we would do, and this is designed to set contrast. Since we expose to the right, this image lacks a lot of contrast, so we need to increase the contrast range. So let's set our black point. We're going to hold down the Alt key, and that's an Option key on a Mac, and we're going to slide to the right, and we see it starts to clip just like it did in Lightroom. And it's okay to clip a shadow on some images. Say you're doing a silhouette of something and you want that shadow information to be black. You would just go ahead and just bring it until everything's black in that silhouetted area. However, here we're making a print. We don't really want to have too much clipping information. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So we set a black point. Let's set a white point. If you try to Alt click or Option click up here on these points, it won't give you that highlight warning and show you where clipping actually takes place. You have to do it down here on curves. So we're going to hold down the Alt key, and that's the Option key on a Mac, and we'll move over, and you'll see that we started to clip our clouds. We'll move back, and we'll set a point right about there. So now everyone knows if you go into your curve tool and you make an adjustment, this is going to be the highlights, because half of this area is the highlights, and if you go over here, that's the shadows. And it's like, wow, that's kind of difficult because you don't have any prediction of where you're making those adjustments. Here's the trick to get rid of those points. If you just click on that point and just drag it off, you can get rid of those points. Okay, now let's show you how you can edit using a what you see is what you get method with curves. So we've set our black point and our white point, but we still want to increase contrast. So what we'll do is we'll come over here and we'll use this. This is an in-image adjustment. So you click on it and it allows you, whatever you hover, if you look over here on this line here, this curve, this tone curve, it's going to give you a point. Okay, so say if we wanted to adjust this sky and we wanted to make it darker, we can just click on it and we can drag up and down right here in the interface on top of the image, and it's going to make that adjustment for us. So say we adjusted our sky, and now let's say we wanted to adjust this area here, this green shrubbery. We wanted it to be brighter, or we wanted it to be darker. We just click on it and we can drag up, and that will increase it, or we can decrease it. Now we're not changing our white point or our black point. We're only manipulating where we've adjusted. Now there's a word of warning. If you look over there on this curve while I'm adjusting, and if I try to make another adjustment really close by, it'll do it. However, it will do some funky stuff. Watch what happens. It'll give us this crazy looking HDR thing, because it's only adjusting between this point and that point. It's not giving us a smooth transition between points. So don't go in and make a bunch of adjustments side by side each other, because you'll get this crazy colors like these purples and stuff that don't exist in your image. Well, the information's there, but it just doesn't jive. Oop, we just blew that whole curve. So let's do that again real quick. So we'll go over here and we'll grab our curves tool, and we're going to set a black point real quick. I'll just show you how fast this can go. There's our black point. We're going to set our white point. So you can't click and drag up there. You have to drag right on the interface below. So there's our white point. Let's grab this tool and let's drag our sky down. We don't want it to be so bright, so let's make it about that bright. And let's go down here into these shrubbery, And let's increase the contrast there as well. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. So the next thing I would do in this image, and you can stack curves and use this as a layer mask. Say for example, I didn't want to make the sky or the rest of the scene as dark as I made the sky. I could go in and paint with black and remove any of that adjustment off this clouds. So it's really a selective adjustment and a fine-tuning adjustment by being able to paint in there. So now I want to deal with the color. So I've got the image the way I want it to look. I want to do another adjustment, and I'm going to do color balance. Okay, color balance is exactly what it does. It lets you balance the colors. And you see that our primary colors are here, red, green, and blue. And if you look to the left of it, noticing RGB, and if you look to the left of it, cyan. These are all the primary colors, and these are the reflected light colors of those channels. So the exact opposite of red is cyan, and the exact opposite of green is magenta, and the exact opposite of blue is yellow. So say for example we wanted to eliminate a magenta cast in an image or a green cast. Say if our image had a green cast to it for some reason. Okay, I know that I've shoot with a couple Nikon cameras that sometimes I get a green cast. Well, to get rid of a green cast I need to add some magenta. Well, if you don't know on a color wheel that the opposite of green is magenta, you wouldn't know what to do. Well, color balance is real simple. It's a what you see is what you get adjustment. So if we add a little bit of magenta, it gets rid of the green cast. Okay? And say if we wanted to increase the blue or decrease the blue, say if we got a blue cast on this mountain, if we bring this yellow slider over, it'll eliminate the blue cast on that back mountain. Okay? And again, this is a mask, so I can get rid of that and do stacking. So say let's just remove the blue. Say we wanted our mountains not to have any blue on it, but we want our sky to be blue. What we'll do is we'll come over here to this mask, we'll hit our brush tool by hitting the B key, and we'll just paint back in everything but this mountain. Or we could just paint the mountain by inverting the mask. I'll just paint in black first. We're going to hit the X key to swap our paint chip, and we'll just come over here and we'll paint in this blue and paint everywhere except on the mountain. And we'll be back to where we were before. Oh, we're on color balance. We're on curves. Let's get rid of that. We need to be painting in the curves mask. So we'll just paint up here. And this, I don't know why everything was so bright. So we'll just paint everything in black except where we were, and it puts everything back to the way it was before we did any color balance. However, we're going to get rid of that blue cast on that mountain. Okay, so let's move this out. Okay, so now if I want to see where the mask is actually doing, if I control click or alt click it, it will show me the mask, and I can just go in and paint this. And to get rid of that again, I just click it. Okay, and I can load that as a selection if I wanted to, and I could refine my selection easily with the refined edge. There's all kinds of little tricks you can do. Hit Control D to deselect that. So you can see that there's the blue cast when I let loose of this curves, and there is the blue cast gone. So you can stack these guys. So let's do another color balance. Say if I wanted to mess with the green. So I'll come over here and I'm going to do another adjustment, and it will be the color balance. And I will just say I wanted to maybe get rid of some of the green cast and put in some magenta. And say if I wanted to increase the blue a little bit in the sky, or decrease the blue. Let's drop the blue back. Okay, so say that's what I like. Now I want to increase the saturation in the sky in blue. I would come over and I would grab a vibrance adjustment. Now what a vibrance adjustment does is it saturates areas that aren't already saturated, and it leaves the saturated areas alone. That doesn't kind of make sense, but if you use saturation, hue saturation, it's going to saturate everything on the whole image, where vibrance only saturates areas that are not saturated. So we're going to pick up a lot of this rich color in the gold because it wasn't really saturated, but it's not really doing a lot on the blue, and I can do a lot of adjustment and you see that it's not affecting the blue. Now if I grab the saturation, watch what happens to the blue and the golds. Okay, so we'll just zero this out. So this would be my vibrance adjustment. And then if I wanted to really go in and adjust the blues, we'll do a hue saturation adjustment. So here's a hue saturation. Okay, and we can target the area that we want to saturate, and we can specifically address it, and I'll show you how you do that. If you come over here to master and you click on just the blues, now if you look down here, there's some color bars, and it's showing you that it's picking up between these blues and these pinks. And how we're going to do this and show what it's actually selecting our control. Say we can just see here, there's blue adjustment. It's going to increase it or decrease it. Let's zero that out. But maybe we're not isolating the blue by itself. So let's grab the saturation and just shove it up. You can see that there's a lot of purple being grabbed. And this is accurate because the selection down here is actually adding some pinks and purples. So if we grab in between this little square and this rectangular line, and we move this to the left, you'll see that some of that purple will go away, and we can get rid of some of that light blue and only affect just the blue. Or if we wanted to increase the area of range that it's affecting with this saturation, we can increase it in the color bars. So let's just shut that down and just get the blue. Let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see where we're targeting. Okay, so we're going to be pushing in just the blues, and I'm trying to get rid of this purple in pinks. So now we're only going to be affecting the blue only. I hope you guys can see that. Okay, so let me get out of this brush tool. Let me zoom back out. I'm going to hold the Z key and then hit the Alt key, and the Alt is the Option key on the Mac. It's going to be a minus bar in the zoom, and if I double click, it'll bring me that back out. So now it's only affecting that shade of blue. So I'm going to bring my saturation back to 0. And I can just increase the saturation a little bit, and I can adjust how dark it is or how light it is. But if you look at this mountain here, let's zoom in here to the mountain. I'm only affecting the blue that we targeted, which is right here. If you watch this, this shade of blue is the only thing being affected. You see it's dark and now it's light. It's dark and now it's light. So that's all that we're affecting. So we can have pinpoint adjustments on our hue saturation. It just doesn't have to be a global thing. So let's go ahead and let's close that. Let's close it out. Zoom back out. So the image is looking pretty good. Let me fix this so it fits the screen a little bit. Okay. So say if I wanted to add a vignette on this. This is where we could use curves again. Curves is a great tool. I use it for everything. So let's go here and grab our curves tool. And before we do that, let's make a selection. Let's control this, just delete this one altogether. Delete it. And we'll just close this out. What I want to do is I'm going to create a selection. With the marquee rectangle selection, let's just select this. Okay, and let's go ahead and refine the edge. And we're going to feather it. We're going to round those corners up. Not quite so much. And say if I want to shift it in a little bit. Now it's selecting only the inside of this image. So we select OK. And I don't want it to select the image. I want it to get dark around the edges. So I want to invert the selection. So that's Control-Shift-I or Command-Shift-I on a Mac. And now you see that it created marching ants on the outside. So now we're only affecting this area. So we're going to select our Curves tool again. Curves. And now it's loaded that selection only in the curves. You see the mask? Only the white area will be affected. Now if we drag this down, that'll let us create a vignette on our image. And you can drag it deep if you want, and then adjust the opacity to taste. So say if you just add it in like that. But I like to actually just add it here. And I can only affect just the lower areas if I like, or I can affect the highlights and the shadow areas. So we'll come down here and we'll just add a small vignette. and this will be my image. I'll close this out, and we'll just hit Control S or File Save, and Control's Command on Mac, and it will send that back out into to Lightroom. It'll bring our image in as an edited TIFF, and there we have it. We have the original image still intact. Actually, it's this one here. That was the original, and there's the edited version. So we can make as many copies as we like and keep experimenting and playing with the images. Well, I want to thank you for visiting my blog today, and I know I fumbled through this one a little bit. There's a lot of tools that we talked about, and I went through it pretty fast. If you guys have any questions, please comment in the blog section. Let me know that, hey, I didn't understand the curves, or your tutorials are too long, I don't make it through it, I don't want to watch something that long. Just give me some feedback, and we'll target your guys' education to what you want to learn and how you want to learn it. So I thank you all for visiting my blog today. Until next time, we'll see you soon.